what does it actually mean to be authentic? So many people are talking about it, but is it worth it? And what does it actually mean? I think that is a really, really good question. And the channel is called Authentic Business Blueprint. So what does that even mean? I've been thinking about this because this is my journey. So, and hopefully also yours. But I was like, okay, so what does it really mean to me? Like, with creating a lot of content, a lot of videos, how do I keep that authenticity? And I thought, let's try and ask AI. But before I did that, I did choose to write down my own definition of it. And I want to read that to you first. And then let's see how that holds up against AI and what they say about it. And then let's also talk a bit about, maybe, do you agree? And I would love to know in the comments, how do you agree? And then I'm going to also look at what AI chose to say about the difference between authenticity in personal aspects as a leader and in terms of a business. But let me start with my own thoughts around it here. Okay, so I wrote this in Danish. I'm going to translate. Okay, so to be authentic is first and foremost about living according to your own values. It's about always stopping and feeling and getting in touch with your feelings of if it matches your values. Just like stop, think, and does this actually match my values and my goals? And even if it's hard, does it match? Does it not match? Why is this hard? And actually, especially when it is hard, it's really important to make that, like, to stop and have these thoughts about it, like to really reflect on this. It's also about knowing that I can be authentic now and still have a goal that changes me in the future, and that I can be authentic in both. Because one of my internal struggles has been like, but how can I be authentic now if who I really want to be is someone else in the future? But I realized that that's because it's a journey. So I can be authentic to who I want to be now, but at the same time, strive to be someone better. And then looking at that, also looking into your personal values, of course, and knowing them. And a lot of people have never reflected on their values. So if you don't know your values, then I suggest you you spend a little time and actually reflect on those. There are a lot, like if you Google how to find my values, then there's going to be lots of online things and more like physical printouts of things. I have an exercise that I did with where I printed out all of these different words that was different values, and I put them up against each other. So saying, okay, so helping others versus reaching my goals, or versus being financially safe, or having freedom. So for each thing, you kind of say, what's more important, this or this? And then all of a sudden you have like 90 words or 90 values here, and you can kind of see, okay, so these ones are actually my top values. And some of them are not going to matter to you at all. I started out asking ChatGPT, God, and Gemini about what it means to be authentic. And I'm going to read um, what Gemini said, because I thought that made the most sense, because they were saying more or less the same, just different wordings for it. So what Gemini is saying is that authenticity is a practice of aligning your external actions and speech and relationships with your internal values, beliefs, and true self. It involves a courageous commitment to being real rather than performing a role or conforming to societal pressure just to gain approval. To be authentic is to accept your own imperfections and to navigate the world with a sense of integrity, ensuring that who you are on the inside is consistently reflected on who you show up on as the outside. I freaking love that. And I think there was a bit more depth to this than what I wrote, I think, but it so resonates with me. And this is the journey I'm on, right? And maybe it's a journey you're on right now, to make those two things match. Because I don't know, especially with social media today, it's about, we live in a world where there's so much focus on outer validation, about getting the likes, getting the attention, getting the praise, all these things, where living the authentic life is more about being okay with giving that to yourself and living that life. if that makes sense. Okay, so talking about what does it mean as an individual to live authentically and be authentic. The first thing is reduce the cognitive dissonance. That means, like I was saying just before, to stop living like you think someone else wants you to be, who you think other people want you to be. What does it look like? Like, who are you? So start living more towards your values and who you are, and less towards who you think society wants you to be. Because there is 100% going to be a dissonance there. There's going to be a conflict of interest. So starting to, and do it small, that's okay. But just always keep your values and your goal in mind here. And it's really about cultivating your true self-esteem. So going from that outer validation to the inner validation that really helps you believe in yourself and trust yourself and your opinions along the way. And then when you start actually listening to yourself and looking at how does my actions relate to my values and where I want to go in this authenticity, it also helps you to stop chasing other people's goals and to start focusing on what are your goals? What is it that you want to achieve in life? It's your freaking life, and you only have this once to do this, depending on what you believe. But basically, it's like, why not get the most out of the opportunity you have right now? And the way to do that will be to be authentic to yourself. And when I say get the most, it's not necessarily the most money or the most fame, it's the most joy, and get the most out of you, who you are, your potential, who you want to be. So that's kind of the focus of authenticity in a personal setting. It's all about you, who you want to be. When we're looking at it from a leadership perspective, there's a few other things. Everything kind of interconnects, but there's a few other things as well. So it's still about building trust. So the internal part, the internal trust to yourself for the authentic self. But when we're talking about leadership, it's about having those same values, but also acting in the same way so that you build trust with your employers or with the people you lead, so that they know that these are your values, these are the things that is important to you. And when you make a decision, you will make it based on that. And it's about having or taking actions that match what you're saying. So it's about doing what you say you're going to be doing and creating a psychological safety in your team as well. And that will then also create higher engagement from your employees. It will make them trust you, and it will create loyalty to you as a leader. Another thing about being authentic as a leader and person in general is being able to admit when you don't have all the answers, when there's something you don't know, and maybe even when you make mistakes. And as a manager or a leader, that becomes even more important as you create a room for people to be vulnerable. You create this room for people to do the same, to admit when they made mistakes, to say, you know what, I'm really sorry I screwed up, but I learned from my mistake. But creating this room where people trust that you will support them and that you will be part of their journey and let them be vulnerable as well. That is what authenticity can help you do. And it's about being in this sphere of learning instead of fear of making mistakes and fear of getting fired, fear of repercussions, and really also the fear of perfectionism. I don't like that word. I don't like perfectionism. It's not a thing in my world. And as a leader, when you base your leadership on authenticity, it also means that it's really easy for you to make decisions because the the path is clear, and you know that, well, these are the values from the company, these are your values. This is a decision that makes sense for where we're going, what we're go what so you don't spend as much energy or any at all on how this will look. Like, I wonder what my colleagues will think of me when I make this decision. You think more about, and you make decisions more on, does this align with the company mission? Does this make sense for my team and the company? And that makes a lot more sense, because again, if it makes sense, then most likely it's going to look good anyways. Okay, so let's go to the last part, which is about how authenticity can look as a business owner and in a business. So the first thing that's super important with being authentic is the opportunity to create real connections with people, with your potential clients, potential collaborators, employees, just creating those connections that make sense. And you do that by, well, being authentic, but also being good at communicating authentically and getting away from all of the marketing speak, sort of say that focusing on what is the brand voice and what is your voice and how can that connect with each other. If you have, I'm assuming your own company here, but let's say that you're also talking to your employees about being that they should be authentic in the business, then it's also about figuring out how do you match their voice, their authentic voice with the company's authentic message and voice. Because it's not authentic if your employees end up trying to speak like you, because that's you, right? That's your authentic voice. It's also much easier to reduce misunderstandings and conflicts because, again, you operate based on a set of values. And when we communicate based on those, then people know where they have us. They know where we are. They know how we communicate. And a lot of the times, it's just way easier. It creates transparency and setting the boundaries and being clear. It also gives respect instead of resentment because people overpromise, or it's always a good idea to underpromise and overdeliver, right? So keeping those promises and being clear and authentic in your communication, both internally and externally. And when you create an authentic environment or an environment that gives room for people to be themselves, it also creates a room where there is space for different opinions and diversity in a way that also holds respect for one another. And it gives a good opportunity to avoid groupthink because we all know that that everyone is different. So by having a business that is focusing on authenticity, both internal and externally, the best ideas, the best opportunities will be the ones that show up because everyone is open to speak up. Everyone is more prone to actually tell you what they mean and their opinion and share their ideas. And they're not sitting somewhere and just like keeping their mouths shut because they're afraid that you'll be mad or something like that. So running your business with your values up front and with good communication and being authentic is a huge plus. With absolutely both fun and excitement, have a fantastic rest of your day.